The lights inside the simulation chamber dimmed, and a mechanical voice echoed. Survival scenario, Omega class. Begin. Aaron Holt barely had time to register the words before the world flickered around him. Metal walls dissolved into humid air, and the floor beneath his boots softened into wet earth. He stumbled forward, hit by the heat of a twin-sunned jungle, the air thick with smoke and the distant shrieks of things hunting. Around him, 50 cadets materialized, scaled, furred, feathered, armored in training harnesses. They hailed from a dozen worlds, but all wore the same expression. Confusion snapping into fear as the first explosion thundered in the distance. Branches cracked overhead. The jungle shook with the approach of predators. And then came the sound that froze every cadet's blood. Crying. Small shapes clung to the ground at their feet. Cubs, simulated but lifelike, each one modeled after the cadet's species. Wide eyes, too young to understand. They wailed and reached up with tiny hands, claws, or tendrils. Aaron's gut clenched. He recognized the rules of this test instantly. "This is survival," hissed a Tharn cadet beside him, shaking off a trembling hatchling that clawed at his leg. "Dead weight! Leave them!" No one argued. One by one, cadets wrenched free from their young, faces hard with determination. A reptilian Veyari shoved its cub aside with brutal efficiency. A feathered Iryx shrieked in frustration and ran, abandoning its tiny, helpless copy. Within seconds, the clearing was a storm of motion, cadets scattering into the trees, their cubs left behind in the dirt. Aaron stood frozen. The rules were clear. Survival at all costs. The cubs were bait, obstacles meant to test resolve. Everyone knew that. And yet, a human infant's cry pierced the air. Not real, he reminded himself. Just code. Just an illusion. But his chest tightened anyway. His boots didn't move forward. They moved back. Toward the cubs. He bent down, scooping up the human child and clutching it against his chest. Then another. Then another. Their small, trembling weight pressed into him, hot and fragile. "You're insane, Holt!" shouted a cadet as they vanished into the trees. "You'll die!" Aaron ignored them. His arms were full now, but still more cubs cried. Veyari hatchlings, Iryx chicks, a tiny Tharn with trembling claws. His mind screamed no, but his body moved anyway. He grabbed them, shifting his balance, tucking them close. One by one until his chest, arms, and even his backpack were burdened with helpless life. The jungle shook again. Something massive roared in the distance. The cubs whimpered, pressing into him. Aaron's jaw clenched. He whispered through gritted teeth, "All right, you're with me." High above, in the observation deck, Commander Veyrix Kor folded his arms. His dark mandibles clicked in disdain as he watched the human stumble forward, overloaded with squirming young. "Predictable," Veyrix muttered. "Humans mistake sentiment for strength. Let us see how far this one crawls before he breaks." The predators roared again, closer now. The game had begun. The jungle that did not wait. Something crashed through the canopy behind Aaron, the sound of bark splintering and vines whipping free. The cubs in his arms shrieked, their cries a beacon to every predator in the simulation. "Quiet!" he hissed, but they were too terrified to obey. He shifted his grip, tucking the smallest, a trembling Iryx chick, into the crook of his neck. Its feathers tickled his skin, heartbeat fluttering like a trapped bird. Branches whipped at his face as he pushed forward. The other cadets were long gone, flashes of movement already swallowed by foliage. He could still hear them on the comms though, harsh, panicked voices. "Sector 3's cut off! Form groups of 5! Forget the hatchlings, they're bait!" Aaron's earpiece crackled with static before a cold voice cut through. "Cadet Holt, Commander Veyrix, watching from above, judging. You have taken unnecessary weight. Do you intend to compromise the entire exercise for sentiment?" Aaron adjusted the cubs, ignoring the ache spreading through his shoulders. They're alive. They are simulated constructs, Vedic snapped. Code, nothing more. Every cadet understands this. Why don't you? Because they're still children, Aaron muttered. Too quiet for anyone but himself. But Vedic's heard. Sentiment. Weakness. You will learn. The comms clicked off. Aaron pushed forward, sweat dripping down his temple. His thighs burned from the weight. He could barely keep his footing on the uneven ground. Each cub whimpered or clung to him, a tangle of claws, feathers, and tiny hands. A shadow shifted in the underbrush. He froze. Slowly, he backed against the tree, pressing the cubs to his chest. Through the foliage, two yellow eyes blinked open, slitted, hungry, unblinking. A predator, taller than him, padded into the light. Its body rippled with the simulation-coded muscle, scales glinting in the sun. Rose off, teeth glistened as it inhaled, catching the scent of prey. The cubs whimpered louder. Shh, Aaron whispered, though his own pulse thundered. He had no rifle, just the standard issue shock baton at his hip and his wits. The creature stepped closer, each footfall like a drumbeat. Aaron's eyes darted. To his left, a broken branch. To his right, a vine dangling low. An idea sparked. Humans weren't the strongest species, not the fastest, but improvisation? That was theirs. He crouched low, murmuring to the cubs. Hold tight. The predator lunged. Aaron swung the vine with his free hand, snapping it across the creature's eyes. It snarled, momentarily blinded. He ducked left, dragging the cubs with him, and jammed the shock baton into its side. Blue arcs of energy sizzled. The predator shrieked, thrashing backward into the trees. Aaron didn't wait to see if it recovered. He ran. Every step jarred his body. His lungs burned. But he held on, adjusting the cubs so none were crushed, so every tiny body stayed secure. Minutes later, he stumbled into a clearing where two cadets crouched, one Veyari, one Tharn. They spun toward him, weapons raised, then lowered them when they recognized him. You're alive? The Veyari hissed, frilled crest twitching. How? Luck! Aaron panted, setting the cubs down in the grass for a moment. His arms screamed in relief. The Tharn sneered. Still carrying those things? You'll get us all killed. They're children, Aaron shot back. They're obstacles, the Tharn growled, baring sharp teeth. Look around, human. The predators are tracking noise. Those cubs are a dinner bell. They're our responsibility, Aaron said. He crouched beside the Irex chick, stroking its feathered head until it calmed. If the simulation wanted us to abandon them, it wouldn't make them so real. That's the point, the Veyari said, voice quieter, uncertain. They test if we can separate logic from illusion. Aaron met her gaze. Or maybe they're testing if we know what's worth saving. For a moment, silence. The jungle buzzed around them, unseen creatures screeching in the canopy. The Tharn spat. You're insane. He stormed off into the trees, muttering curses. The Veyari lingered. She glanced at the cubs, then back at Aaron. If you're wrong, you'll die with them. If you're right... She trailed off. Then, with a frustrated hiss, she extended her claws. I'll cover you, for now. Aaron gave a tight nod. There wasn't much, but it was something. Together, they gathered the cubs again. Aaron bore most of the weight, though the Veyari tucked one of her hatchlings under her arm with reluctant care. They moved on, deeper into the simulation. The terrain shifted, dense jungle thinning into jagged stone, heat giving way to cold winds that cut like blades. A manufactured storm swirled overhead, lightning splitting the clouds. The simulation was adapting, escalating. Aaron knew who was behind it. Veyrix. The commander's voice echoed across the cadets' shared channel. Sector change initiated. Only the strong will endure. The wind howled, nearly ripping the cubs from Aaron's arms. He hunched low, shielding them with his body. The Veyari cursed in her native tongue, shielding her hatchling under her cloak. One of the cubs, A Tharn, the one left behind by its own cadet, wailed louder than the storm. Aaron adjusted his grip, whispering into its ear. "It's all right. I've got you." The Veyari stared at him like he was speaking madness, but her eyes softened, just for a breath. Behind them, another roar split the storm. The predators were not done hunting, and this time Aaron knew. They were faster. He gritted his teeth, muscles trembling under the strain. There was no logic in what he was doing, no tactical efficiency, but he wasn't letting go. Not now. Not ever. He set his jaw and pushed forward into the storm, cubs clutched close, the Veyari at his side. Above, in the control deck, Vedix watched with cold satisfaction. "Let the human run," he murmured. "Compassion cannot outlast the hunt. He will break." But in the storm below, Aaron whispered to the cubs with unshakable certainty. "Not while I'm still breathing." The storm howled like a living thing. Aaron staggered over jagged rock, boots slipping on wet stone, cubs clutched close to his chest. Each gust of wind was a wall slamming into him, threatening to tear the smallest from his grip. The Veyari cadet at his side hissed curses through clenched teeth, her crest flattened tight against her skull to keep the sleet from freezing it stiff. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the valley below. Aaron's stomach dropped. The path ahead was collapsing. Whole slabs of stone sheared away into the abyss, vanishing into the storm. The cubs cried louder. Aaron shifted his footing, steadying himself. He couldn't stop. If he hesitated, the storm would swallow them. His thighs burned, his arms ached, but he held on. "Insane," the Veyari muttered. She glanced at him, her slitted pupils narrowing. "You can't carry them all. Leave some. At least save yourself." Aaron shook his head, rain dripping into his eyes. "Not happening." "You'll kill us both," she snapped. "Then we die trying," he shot back, voice raw. A flash of yellow light flared overhead. The simulation adjusted again. The predators had returned. Their shadows slithered across the cliffs, massive, quadrupedal, faster than before. The storm seemed to push them closer, funneling them toward the cadets like prey driven into a trap. Aaron's comm crackled alive. "Cadet Holt," Commander Vedix's voice oozed disdain. "Your persistence is impressive, but misplaced. Observe." The ground trembled. Behind Aaron, one of the stone ledges cracked and fell away, taking with it 3 cubs that had clung to the wet surface. "No!" Aaron lunged, nearly pitching himself into the void. But he managed to snag one cub by its arm, hauling it back. The other 2 plummeted, only for the simulation to pause them mid-fall, then dissolve them into static. Code erased. Vedix's voice was ice. "Do you see? They are illusions, not real. Your suffering is wasted." Aaron's chest heaved, heart hammering. He looked down at the cub in his arms, the little Tharn, claws clutching desperately at his jacket. Its wide eyes met his, shimmering with terrified tears. Illusion or not, the fear was real. The trust was real. Aaron's jaw clenched. "Then let me waste it." Vedix's silence carried more fury than words. Another tremor split the ledge. Aaron stumbled, twisting his ankle on loose stone. Pain lanced up his leg. He bit back a curse, tightening his grip on the cubs. His body screamed for rest, for release, but he forced himself forward. The Veyari paused, her crest flaring as she caught his stumble. "You're injured." "Not stopping." "You'll slow us both down." "Then leave," Aaron rasped. He adjusted the cubs again, forcing his weight onto his good leg. "But I'm not leaving them." The Veyari stared at him for a long moment. Something unreadable flickered across her reptilian face. Anger. Maybe pity. Then she hissed and pressed on ahead, slashing her claws into the stone to pull herself forward. Aaron limped after her. Cubs clutched close, every step agony. Hours, or maybe only minutes, blurred together in the storm. His arms felt like molten lead. His ankle throbbed with each step. The cubs were quiet now, too tired to cry, their tiny bodies shivering against him. He tried to shield them with his jacket, tucking them against his chest for warmth. His vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing himself to stay upright. A memory surfaced, unbidden. He was 12 again, back on Earth. The blackout storms had knocked out half the colony's power grid. He'd been walking home when he'd found the neighbor's dog, small, trembling, trapped under a fallen beam. Everyone else was running for cover. His father had shouted for him to leave it. "It's not worth it, Aaron. Get to shelter." But he hadn't. He'd bled his hands raw pulling that beam until the dog crawled free, licking his dirt-streaked face. His father had been furious. His mother had only smiled, shaking her head. "You can't help yourself, can you? Always running toward what everyone else runs from." The memory dissolved as a new roar split the storm. Predators, closing in. Aaron spun, baton raised one-handed, cubs cradled in the other. A massive shape loomed through the rain, claws scraping stone. It lunged. The Bayari struck first. Her claws slashed across its flank, drawing a screech of fury. "Go!" she barked, tail whipping. "I'll hold them!" Aaron's stomach lurched. "You can't fight them alone. Neither can you while carrying those things." He hesitated, every instinct screaming to stay, but the cubs whimpered, clinging tighter. He turned and forced himself onward, heart shattering at every sound of the Veyari's battle, fading into the storm. The path narrowed to a knife-edge cliff. Aaron limped along it, cubs pressed close, wind howling to tear them away. His ankle nearly buckled. He caught himself against the stone, teeth gritted against a cry of pain. He couldn't keep this up. His body was breaking. The cubs whimpered, shivering in the cold. One pressed its head against his neck, trusting him completely. Aaron swallowed hard. His arms trembled, his legs burned, his lungs were fire. But his voice was steady when he whispered, "I've got you. I won't let go." Above, in the observation deck, Beirix leaned forward, mandibles clicking. His dark eyes isiklinene, stirred with anticipation. "Break, human. Break." But Holt did not. He limped forward, battered, broken, yet unyielding. Cubs clutched close as though his soul itself would shatter if he let them go. And that refusal, more than strength, more than tactics, was what terrified Beirix most. The storm ended as suddenly as it began. One moment, sleet lashed his face. The next, silence dropped heavy across the jagged cliffs. The air stank of ozone, the ground slick with melted ice. For the first time in hours, Aaron could hear his own breath, ragged, shallow, grinding through clenched teeth. The cubs stirred weakly in his arms. They were exhausted, their cries gone hoarse. Tiny claws and fingers dug into his jacket, clinging as if their lives depended on it. In a way, they did. Aaron's ankle was swollen, every step a lightning bolt of pain. He limped into a canyon where broken towers of black stone jutted like broken teeth. At the far end, fire glowed faintly. A fortress gate, massive and foreboding, its walls crawling with movement. Predators. Dozens of them, their eyes reflecting orange firelight. Aaron's stomach turned to ice. The fortress was the exit. He could feel it. Every sim had a threshold, survive long enough, endure enough trials, and the final door opened. But this one was guarded, a gauntlet designed to crush anyone who dared reach it burdened. He whispered to the cubs, "Almost there. Just a little farther." A voice crackled over his comm. "Human!" The Veyari's voice, ragged, labored. "I survived. Barely. But I will not follow you farther." Aaron stopped, leaning against the canyon wall. "You fought them off?" "Barely," she hissed. "But look ahead. That fortress is suicide. You're already broken. Drop the cubs. Finish this as a warrior, not a martyr." "I'm finishing it as myself," Aaron rasped. A long pause. Then the line went dead. One by one, other cadet voices flickered in. A Tharn mocking him. An Irix calling him a fool. Even those who hadn't spoken to him before now chimed in. Not to help, but to wash their hands off him. Dead man walking. Not even his own species will thank him. Watch him fail. That's humanity. Soft, weak, impry. Cortical. Aaron shut off his comm. The silence was better than their voices. He adjusted the cubs in his arms, pressing his cheek against the smallest. His muscles shook from fatigue. His ribs ached with each breath. But when he looked up at the glowing fortress, something in him hardened. "They'll have to tear you from me," he whispered. "All of you." From the observation deck, Commander Verix leaned forward, mandibles flexing as he surveyed the gauntlet. The fortress was his masterpiece. Walls crawling with war beasts, paths choked with fire traps, platforms collapsing into magma rivers. "Holt cannot pass," Verix muttered. "Not with that burden." An aide beside him glanced nervously at the display. "And if he does?" Verix's mandibles twitched into something sharp, almost a smile. "Then the galaxy will learn its greatest mistake." Erin stepped into the canyon. The ground trembled. The predators stirred, rising from their crouches with guttural snarls. The cubs whimpered. Erin whispered, "Hold tight," and charged. The first beast lunged, claws slashing. Erin pivoted on his good leg, slamming his shock baton into its jaw. Sparks crackled, the creature recoiling just enough for him to limp past. Another lunged from the side. He ducked low, using his shoulder to ram it into the wall. The impact rattled his bones, but he kept moving. Every step was agony, every breath fire, but his arms never loosened. A gout of flame burst from the stone ahead, scorching the air. Erin twisted his body, shielding the cubs with his back. Pain seared his shoulder, the scent of burnt cloth filling his nose. He staggered, but did not fall. The cubs whimpered against him. "I've got you," he whispered through clenched teeth. "Almost there." Another predator blocked the narrow pass, massive, armored in scales. No way around. No way through. Erin stared at it, chest heaving. His baton sparked weakly, nearly out of charge. His body screamed to collapse, but surrender was not an option. He shifted the cubs higher on his chest, freeing one hand. His fingers scraped the ground, closing around a jagged shard of stone. Not much of a weapon, but enough. He met the beast's yellow eyes. "Come on then!" It lunged. Erin roared and drove the stone into its eye. Hot fluid sprayed his hand. The beast shrieked, thrashing. Erin shoved past, stumbling through as it collapsed, still clawing at the wound. The fortress gate loomed closer now. Each step was a lifetime. His legs finally buckled. He dropped to one knee, gasping, the cubs whimpering as they tumbled against his chest. "Get up," he whispered to himself. His vision blurred. "Get up, Erin." Nothing moved. His arms shook, refusing to lift him. For the first time, despair clawed at him. Maybe Verix was right. Maybe this was impossible. Maybe compassion was weakness. Then, something small touched his chin. He blinked down. One of the cubs, the Tharn, had lifted its tiny claw to his face. Its eyes were wide, tearful, but steady. Trusting him. A spark reignited in Erin's chest. He grit his teeth, forcing his body upright. Not stopping. Step by step, dragging his broken ankle, shoulder burning, lungs clawing for air, he forced himself forward. The fortress gate opened, light flooding out like dawn breaking. Erin stumbled through, cubs clutched to his chest, body on the edge of collapse, but unbroken. In the observation deck, silence reigned. Dozens of overseers stared at the display, stunned. Cadets who had abandoned their cubs watched in shame and awe. Verix's mandibles ground together. "Impossible," he hissed. No one survives that with a burden." Yet the human had. And he hadn't let go. The chamber lights dimmed, and silence pressed in like a physical weight. The pods cracked open one by one, releasing delegates back into reality. The simulation was over, but the echoes of what had happened inside clung to the room like a storm cloud refusing to move on. Kieran stepped out last, still cradling the smallest cub in his arms. It whimpered softly, instinctively curling into his chest. His arms ached, his legs burned, but he refused to set it down. The alien representatives stared at him, as though he had grown into something monstrous or divine. "Unprecedented," rasped Chancellor Verix, his crystalline skin flickering with agitation. "No being has ever altered the simulation parameters. It was designed to test individual survival. Yet you..." He jabbed the clawed digit at Kieran. "You subverted it." Kieran adjusted the cub gently, his voice steady. "I didn't subvert it. I just refused to abandon them. Survival without purpose is nothing but fear wearing a crown." A ripple of unease moved across the gathered species. Some sneered, others whispered urgently, but no one laughed. The humans' words landed heavier than weapons fire. Ambassador Tharil, his scaled features still pale from the ordeal, finally found his voice. "You carried all of them. Do you comprehend what that means? You slowed yourself, reduced your chances of survival to nearly nothing, and yet you succeeded. The system bent around you." Kieran's gaze swept the room. "No, it didn't bend. It showed you what you never asked yourselves. Maybe survival isn't the test. Maybe compassion is." The cub whimpered again. He stroked its fur with a tenderness that cut sharper than steel. The alien leaders could not unsee the image. The lone human staggering beneath impossible weight, refusing to let a single small life be lost. High Magistrate Chiraka, who had long argued humans were too reckless for inclusion in the council, slammed her staff down. "This is dangerous. A precedent of defiance. If one species refuses the terms of our trials, chaos spreads. Our unity dissolves." "Unity?" Kieran's voice cracked out like a whip. He stepped forward, the cub still in his arms. "You call it unity when you leave the weak behind. You call it order when you abandon your young. If that's your standard, then maybe it's not unity you have. It's convenience." Gasps rippled. Some of the more warlike species bristled, but others, particularly those whose young had been carried out by him, watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. For a long, suffocating moment, no one moved. Then, from the gallery above, a voice called out. It was Elder Harvon of the Terrene, a species notorious for their cold pragmatism. The simulation was intended to measure the worth of a species in crisis. Yet I find myself asking, who here feels smaller for watching what the human did? No one answered. Harvon continued. Perhaps we have mistaken what it means to endure. Survival without principle is only prolonging death. But survival with compassion, that may be the seed of something greater. The chamber shifted. Dozens of eyes turned back to Kieran, to the cub nestled safely in his arms. Verix's crystalline form dimmed, his anger faltering under the weight of the moment. And what do you propose, human? That we rewrite our traditions? That we allow sentiment to overrule logic? Kieran set the cub gently on the polished floor. It padded a few steps, then turned back, pressing against his boot as though unwilling to leave. His voice softened, but carried to every corner. No, I'm not here to rewrite your laws. I'm just showing you that humanity doesn't measure life in units of efficiency. We don't leave the helpless behind. If that breaks your simulations, then maybe your simulations were broken already. The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was the sound of 1,000 unspoken reckonings. Finally, Taril, who had once dismissed Kieran as an outlier, inclined his head. You may have just altered how the council perceives humanity. His eyes flickered to the cubs that had survived because of Kieran's refusal to quit. And perhaps how we perceive ourselves. Kieran exhaled, shoulders sagging. He wasn't sure if he had won anything, or if he had just painted humanity as an anomaly too dangerous to ignore. But as the cub nuzzled against his leg, he knew one truth with absolute clarity. He would make the same choice again in any simulation, on any battlefield, in any reality. Because carrying the helpless was never a burden. It was the point. Epilogue, eh? Later, in the quiet of his quarters, Kieran found himself staring at the stars beyond the viewport. The cubs had been returned to their guardians, though many had hesitated, watching him with a strange reverence, as though recognizing something no one else could name. A transmission came through, marked private. It's the Council's verdict. Humanity's methods defy convention. They are costly. They be reckless. And yet, they inspire. The message ended with an unprecedented declaration. Humanity is to be considered not only a member of the Council, but a moral counterweight. Where others run, humans may choose to carry. Kieran leaned back, closing his eyes, a tired smile breaking across his face. For once, it wasn't about weapons, or ships, or wars. It was about something deeper, something the galaxy had almost forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, it had taken a single stubborn human to remind them. End of story. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to The Void Narratives for more gripping HFY tales of courage, defiance, and the indomitable spirit of humanity.